Well, listen, it is that time again. That's right. Listen, you know how we do it here at Life Empowerment Church. It is roughing it. That's right. Listen, it is that time to empower, to maximize, to strengthen, and sometimes, listen, we've got to even inform our relationships. And because it is that time and this is what we do, listen, this is why you and I are not here by accident, not here by happenstance. We are here. Why? Because we understand what God wants to do in our relationships. And so, listen, I am glad to be here with you today. Listen, this is pastor and therapist, listen, Marcus Ruffin. And you know how we do things here. Listen, you know how we do it. Listen, we begin to share, we begin to tell people, listen, go ahead and invite, go ahead and bring people into this space and place. Why? Because we don't want to just get better. We understand that if we're in relationships, we want those around us to also get better. And because we want them also to get better, this is why we are inviting people. Listen, this is the reason why we are encouraging people. Listen, this is the reason why we want to make sure that people find themselves right here in the space and place, listen, that helps relationships to be maximized, that helps relationships, listen, to be strengthened, helps relationships, listen, to be empowered. That's right. That's what we do here. And so, listen, I want to go ahead and thank you for those of you that are on YouTube to go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit that bell icon, hit that subscribe button. If you're following us here on Facebook, then listen, I want to make sure that you are liking our page, that you're following us here at Life Empowerment Church, because when we go live, listen, you want to be informed. You want to be made aware. Listen, you want to know. And you know, as we always say, let's like, let's share, let's follow, let's be active. Because this is an interactive time. What do I mean by that is, listen, you can ask questions in real time with what it is that we're discussing. We will talk about the things that are most germane and important to relationships. And in this particular time, listen, we're talking about communication. That's right. This segment, we're talking about communication. And so listen, so we want to make sure that, listen, you understand what this looks like. You understand what it entails, and you understand how to make your communication better. And so listen, we're going to go ahead and dive into our subject matter for today. That's right. Listen, we're going to go ahead and dive into it today. And so listen, as we are diving into it today, let us go ahead and get started. I thank you so much for being here. I thank you so much for reaching out and participating in this time that we have. And so listen, I want to go ahead and let you know here, listen, when we're talking about relationships, it doesn't matter if they're personal or professional. Communication is what bridges the gap. Let me say that again. It doesn't matter if it's personal or professional. When it comes to relationships, communication is what bridges the gap. And because communication bridges the gap, listen, I want you to be able to bridge the gap in your relationships. Listen, I want you to be able to bridge the gap in your relationship. And so listen, as we have been talking in this series, listen, we asked the question, what's communication? We have asked that question. We have answered that question, and we have been able to explain exactly what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and just tell you without you having to answer. Here's what we said. We said good communication. Notice now, good communication, and I have it on the screen behind me. Good communication is the art of sending and receiving a clear message. Good communication. We're not talking about any old kind of communication. We're saying good communication. Listen now, good communication is the art of sending and receiving a clear message. Now, with that, listen, we have broken that down over these other parts, but I'm just highlighting, listen, it's an art, which says that it is a skill set. It is not just something that is a gift. It is not something that is just an ability, but it is a skill set. Now, notice now, it is a skill set. So we have to understand that, listen, we're not talking about whether or not you can speak a language. We're not talking about whether or not you can utilize words. We're talking about whether or not you and I can communicate. And so we said it is the art, notice now, of sending and receiving a clear message. All of those are key words within the definition of what good communication entails. Now, you know, one of the things that we always do is that we always talk about it from a scripture passage because relationships are trifold. They're both spiritual, they're soulish, and they're physical. And because relationships entail those triparts, spirit, soul, and body, we talk about these key components. But here today, I always highlight a scripture passage because it helps us to understand the spiritual side of this. And so notice now communication. Here in Proverbs 18:13, it says, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him." It says, listen, if you and I begin to speak, respond, you and I begin to give some kind of reaction before you and I have heard. Now, not just hearing a portion, not just hearing a part, but hearing the entire message. He says that, listen, if you and I begin to react, you and I begin to respond, you and I even begin to communicate, he says, listen, it is going to be folly and it is going to be shame. How many times is it that you and I have said something to somebody only to come back and say, man, you know, if I had just maybe heard everything you said, maybe if I had given you the opportunity to finish what you were saying, maybe if I had given you the opportunity to complete your thought before I interrupted you, maybe I would not have said or reacted the way that I did. And therefore, listen, this is why you're here today. This is why I'm here today, because listen, we are going to help each other understand this whole thing about communication. Now, we're on part 3 today, and listen, remember, let's go back to our definition now. Good communication is the art of sending and receiving a clear message. And if you were here last week, I talked about the importance and the art of how do I send a message. Now, if you missed last week, you have to go back. If you're on YouTube, you can look that up on our YouTube channel. If you are here with us on Facebook, it is under the video section. And so last week, it was part 2 where we talked about the art of sending a clear message. So this week, I want to talk to you about the art of receiving a clear message. And so listen now, remember, it is an art. It is receiving a clear message. And so remember, communication is a skill which can be learned and improved. And because it is something that is learned and improved, here's where you and I are talking today about the art of listening. I like to call it ear art. It is ear art. And because this is ear art, listen, I need for you to understand that this is so vital in relationships. This is so key in relationships. Matter of fact, this is so key. Let me tell you, studies have shown, you and I probably can identify with this next statement that I have on the screen behind me. Most people today feel misunderstood and unheard. Let me say that again. Most people, and this is across the board. So whether they're talking about family, professional, whether they're talking about acquaintances or associates, across the board, here's what people have said. They feel misunderstood and they feel unheard. And because this is often the case in most relationships, this is the reason why when we talk about the art of listening, it is vital, it is essential if you and I are going to have the kind of relationships that make a difference. If you and I are going to have the kind of relationships that matter. If you and I are going to have the kind of relationships that, listen, at the end of the day, it's the kind of relationship that, listen, you want to be a part of, the kind of relationship in which you feel fulfilled, the kind of relationship in which at the end of the day you still want to be a part of. Now, remember, this is an interactive time. So that means that if you have questions, you can ask them in the here and now. I'm able to see your questions if you're with us on Facebook, on our Life Empowerment Church page, if you are on our YouTube channel. Now, we always encourage people to share this, and people do, and we appreciate that. But you may be watching this on another page, and so if you ask a question, I won't see it, but if you want me to answer it in real time, then I need for you to be able to follow us here at Life Empowerment Church on Facebook or YouTube. All right, so with that being said, now listen, we're talking about the art of listening, the art of listening. Let me say this, hearing is our ability. Listening is the skill. Now, listen, you may need to write that down. You may need to even post that. Listen, you may need to put that in the comment section. Hearing is the ability, but listening is the skill. And so listening, is an invaluable skill. Listen, you cannot put a price tag to listening. And because listening carries that much weight and listening has that much of importance, listen, it is one of the hallmarks of good communication. Listen, if you are a leader, if you are a friend, if you have family members, let me tell you, you and I have to learn how to listen. This is not a choice. This is not a suggestion. If you are going to, once again, have a relationship that matters, you're going to have a relationship that is fulfilling, you're going to have a relationship that literally makes a difference, professional or personal, listening is going to be vital for you and I to acquire. And so therefore, listening can be learned. Acquiring listening skills is an attribute that you and I can acquire. The reality is that some people have a gift, some people have a talent by which they can hear or listen, it's part of kind of their makeup, and so they have a certain kind of advantage because this is kind of built within their DNA. But at the end of the day, here's what I would tell you. It still is an attribute that has to be learned. So even just like I can have a talent for a sport, I can have a talent for a profession. Even if I have a gift to work in this particular industry, it doesn't mean that I still don't have to do the work to really sharpen my skill sets so that I can really be proficient in how I operate within this ability. And so therefore, listen, you and I, when it comes to listening, you and I can learn how to listen better. But listen, this takes practice and this takes work. This is not something that just simply happens simply because I have a desire. That means I've got to learn what does good listening look like. I've got to learn how do I develop these skill sets so that they become a part of my repertoire. They become a part of who I am, that this is not just something that I do kind of when I feel like listening. This is who I am because I am a listener. See, listen, you and I have to be listeners. And so therefore, notice now, I said most people feel misunderstood and unheard. And therefore, the person who has the ability to listen is the person who can be most helpful. You know, the Bible talks about he that hath many friends is because he or she shows him or herself to be friendly. I would tell you, one of the greatest traits that you and I can develop to be good friends, to be great family members, to be great spiritual brothers and sisters, to be great parents, to be great leaders, is you and I being able to learn how to listen. Listen, let me tell you, as much as we think that we can do this because we simply have ears, I would tell you it's not as simple as it seems. And therefore, this is why doing the work and doing the practice is something that most people don't buy into, because they feel like it's not something either that I'm good at, or they feel like, hey, either I can or I can't. And the reality is, if you believe that you can't, you're right. If you believe that you can, you're right. But I'm telling you that if you and I are going to become the kind of listeners that God has in mind, the kind of listeners that your friends want to have in their circle, the kind of relationships that, listen, professionals want to bring you in to their companies and bring you in to their leadership positions and to bring you in to these different professions, is because you have great listening skills. So listen, this first one I want to talk to you about is discriminative listening. This first one I want to talk to you about is discriminative listening. And when we talk about discriminative listeners, here's what I'm telling you. Discriminative listeners, I give you some examples because I think examples will really help articulate this. If you're in a crowded space, and let's say you're at the mall or you're in some sort of community setting, and you begin to hear somebody speaking in another language. Let's say you just heard. For you to be able to do that, you have to discriminate between all the other voices, all the other sounds, all the other activities to be able to pick that up. Now, sometimes those persons are clear. Sometimes those persons are in proximity to you. But the reality is, for you to be able to pick that up, unless they are very loud, takes a discriminative type of listening skills. Let me say it to you also in this way. If you're driving in your car, and let's say you have a lot of people in the car with you, and all of a sudden you hear a noise in your car. Now, there could have been a good conversation, there could have been a lot of laughter, joking around, but all of a sudden you picked up some sound in your car. You say, hold up, what was that? Sometimes you may even tell everybody, hold up, be quiet, I'm listening for something. That's a discriminatory or discriminative listening. It helps you to focus on a specific sound while dismissing all the other sounds. Now, let me show you how this begins to play out in relationship. For all my parents out there, especially my mothers, you remember when you had that newborn and your ears became much more attentive to the different sounds that that child would make? And even though you could be in another room, you could hear something that would all of a sudden grab your attention. And you'd be like, hold up. And sometimes you run in a room. Sometimes you may turn on the baby monitor, turn the sound up a little more. But you had a discriminatory listening capacity by which you were able to pick up what this little baby was doing. I've heard people reference this even as it relates to a pet. And so that it's like my cat was making a sound, my dog was making a certain sound. This is what we call discriminatory listening. But let me tell you, it takes that kind of listening when you talk about moving into a relationship, because this is when, listen, you can differentiate between the different sounds that someone may be making when they're communicating. Even right now, as you can tell, I'm a little more excited. I'm a little more, my voice has gone up. My body language has gone up. Why? I'm a little more excited about what it is that I'm telling you. Well, and so if you're able to see that, but listen, you're also, if you're not watching and you're just listening, you're able to pick that up in my voice. It enables you to be able to pick up verbal cues and to indicate whether or not the emotions that I'm speaking with has changed or they have vacillated in some way. Listen, discriminatory listening helps you and I to be able to pick up the sounds in a conversation that the person may not actually say, but you've heard it. You say, hold up. You ever been talking to your child or talking to a family member and they were saying something, but all of a sudden there was a change in their verbiage there. And I'm not talking about the language, I'm talking about the sound that they made. And because that sound began to have some difference, you say, hold up, what's going on there? What was that about? And even if sometimes they were trying to hide and they were trying to not reveal something, because it came through their sound, you were able to pick it up. It's when you can hear these subtleties and it comes through the emotional variation in their voice that you're able to distinguish between something good or something bad or something that you need to pry a little more. If something you say, hey, you know what, maybe I'm gonna pick that up a little later because there was something about how they said that indicated that something else was going on. See, listen, if you're not listening and you're able to differentiate in the sounds, discriminatory listening, I promise you that when you're in relationship with people will walk away saying that person wasn't listening, that person didn't care. Why? Because they could tell that sometimes without them having to verbalize it, they were trying to innately communicate. And sometimes because we're not discriminatory listening, we don't hear the sound difference. And one of the things that, listen, if you and I are going to develop better relationships, it is being able to pick up the subtleties in the sound of somebody's communication. And it's not always because it's bad or negative, but I'm talking about, listen, it can be positive, it can be exciting, it can be exhilarating. But if I don't have these discriminative listening skills, I won't know how to join in to the conversation. There have been times in which my wife has said to me, you know, when I came to you, I came and I was excited about what it was that was happening, and you didn't like pick up on my excitement. And sometimes I've told her, I said, you know, if you came to me and let's say I was doing something, and for me, as the way I think, I explained to her like I'm in a file. It's like I was in this file, and although I heard you, I did not have that discriminatory listening turned on, and so I was listening to the words, but I wasn't listening to the sound. See, there's a sound in communication that you and I have to be able to pick up. There's another type of listening that I want to talk to you about. And this listening that I'm talking to you about is comprehensive listening. Notice now, this is the kind of listening that you and I bring to the table, and which you and I are listening to understand. See, there are times in which you and I are listening, but we're not listening to understand. Sometimes we're listening to just pacify the person. Sometimes we're listening to just give the appearance of listening, but we're not really engaged in listening. But when you talk about comprehensive listening, sometimes you'll hear this being referred to as active listening. This is when, listen, active listening is when I'm making a conscious decision to hear what people are saying. This is conscious. This is intentional. Listen, this is work. Listen, anybody that's going to take time to put into listening, let me tell you, the deeper that you go, the more intentional that you are, it's going to require, listen, it's going to require work. It's going to require energy. This is why some conversations I tell people, listen, I'm not at a place to have a conversation like that with, because I know that my listening energy, my energy level to listen is not there. And when you and I can communicate that to people, it helps them to then know, hey, this is not a good time. So don't let me try to force a conversation. Don't let me just kind of, bombard this person with a conversation. Let me make sure that I am putting them in a space and place so that there can be communication and not monologue. Not me just talking and there is no listening that's happening with the person. And so when we talk about comprehensive listening, we're talking about active listening. Listen, this is when I am focused on what you are saying. I'm focused on your words. I'm focusing on the message. You remember in part one, we talked about how there are these different parts to a message. There is the words, there's the tone of voice, there is the body language. And so when I am actively listening or I am comprehensively listening, listen, I'm doing this without distraction. I am giving you the kind of attention that says to you, what you're saying to me is important. Without that kind of attention and focus, I'm not really active in listening. I'm not really comprehensive in my listening. And therefore, the goal simply here is to understand. I'm not trying to listen to refute. I'm not trying to listen to combat. I'm listening so that I can understand. And how many times is it that when it comes time for us to listen, especially if somebody has a gripe, if somebody has an issue, if somebody has something that is challenging, how often is it that we're listening to understand? Or are we just listening to figure out how to give our point of view or to give our perspective or to give our side of things? And listen, when you're talking about comprehensive, you're talking about active listening, I am listening to understand what you are communicating. There was a study that was done back in 2003, and it showed that there were two different types of listening. They said there are those that listen to understand, and there are those that are listening to respond. Those that listen to understand, listen, they have a greater satisfaction in their personal relationships. While people may think that listening to understand, while people may think that they might be listening to understand, what most people are really doing is listening to respond. My question to you is, are you and I listening only to respond? Or are you and I listening so that we might be able to really understand what the person is communicating? Now, once again, listen, if you have any questions, you can put those questions right here on our Facebook page. You can put those right here on our YouTube channel, and I would be able to respond to those questions. I don't see any questions at this time. Let me see. There's another. I am actually running this also on my page, and I'm looking to see whether or not anybody has put anything on my page. I don't see anything in that regard. So listen, let us go ahead and keep going. So here, let me talk about this third type of listening. Now, I've been kind of building along the way. And because I've been building along the way, listen, this has been going from foundation to moderate to high level listening. That's right, listen. To go to high level listening, we're talking about therapeutic listening. Now, when you hear therapeutic listening, you may think that this is only for therapists or people that are crisis workers or people that work in maybe the medical profession. No. Don't let therapeutic listening mislead you. Let me tell you, this is the kind of listening that you and I give when we're wanting to help somebody. This is the kind of listening that's not just limited to therapists or medical professions or emergency response workers. Listen, this is the kind of thing that makes you a better friend. This kind of listening makes you a better family member. This is the kind of listening that makes you a better leader. This is the kind of listening that makes you a better manager, a trainer. For those that are coaches, listen, it is the kind of listening that helps you to develop people and cultivate people, because this is the kind of listening that says, I want a relationship. Yeah. Let me say that again. This is the kind of listening that says to somebody else, I want a relationship. A relationship with you is vital. A relationship with you is important. This is the kind of listening that, listen, if I am trying to build friendships, if I am trying to date and I'm trying to find that significant other, this is the kind of listening that you want to cultivate. Now, obviously, this is a higher level of listening, but it is a great level to reach or to strive to acquire, so that you and I can have the kind of relationships that are fulfilling, meaningful, and essential. So when we talk about this kind of listening, listen, this is the kind of listening that's intended to help somebody. This is the kind of listening that you give when somebody's in trouble. When somebody is expressing their emotions, when they're coming to you to get some kind of support, maybe some kind of advice, when they're sharing their heart with you. You know, it's amazing to me how sometimes there are those of us, and when somebody can be pouring out their heart, and it is totally unknown to us. We have no sense of picking up the cues. We have no sense of picking up the vibes. It's almost like we go deaf when they are opening and sharing and giving their heart to us. This is the kind of listening, I'm telling you, that you and I sometimes lose relationships because people, remember I started off saying, most people feel unheard, most people feel misunderstood. And I would tell you, it's simply because not only do we not listen in general, but when people go to like level 5 in opening themselves to us, we don't know how to just listen, to just be there for the person. And this is the kind of listening that allows you and I to have effective skills to be able to help a person process their emotions, process their thoughts, to be able to get what's on their heart off of their heart. This is the kind of thing where people will say to you, you know what? Excuse me. Thank you for listening. This is the kind of thing that somebody will say, thank you for just taking time out to hear me. This is the kind of thing that most people want in any kind of relationship, even if it's not bad, but it's good. I thank you for being able to hear when I have a good story. You know, they say that a lot of people go to see a therapist because they simply want somebody to hear them. They just want to be heard. They just want to be understood. They're not even always looking for answers. They're not even always looking for solutions. They're just simply looking for somebody who has the ability to be empathetic and to hear and to just help them process what's happening. And I'm saying to you that if you and I are going to have the kind of relationships that matter, the kind of relationships that are fulfilling, the kind of relationships that makes a difference in our lives and in their lives, it is this therapeutic listening. It's amazing to me how many people really don't even have friendships. They have associates, they have acquaintances, they have people, that are kind of within the circles of where they work, and they're within the circles of where they live. But you know how you know whether or not you have some good relationships? Who can you turn to and share your heart, share your most intimate thoughts and desires and challenges? How many people can you go to? How many people do you feel like if I turn to this person, they're going to listen? I'm telling you that, listen, one of the things that you and I have to really work on is this therapeutic listening. Listening so that at the end of the day, the person feels heard, the person feels like someone has been listening, they feel like they have had somebody to give them a listening ear. And this is an art. Let me tell you, this is an art. Just simply because you have ears to hear doesn't mean that you have listening skills for them to be heard. And I'm saying to you that, listen, this is why we are here at Ruffin. Now, I'm looking to see whether or not anybody has any questions. I always appreciate the interaction, appreciate how you will, comment and all those great things. I appreciate that and love that. But I always check to see whether or not there are any questions that maybe anybody has, because this is why we're here, not just to have the teaching, not just to have the information, not just to have the insight, but to also be able to answer questions. I don't see anything here on our Facebook page. I'm looking here on our YouTube channel. I don't see anything there. Let me check even on my own page. Let me see if I see anything there. And I don't even see anybody having any questions here on my page. So listen, I want you all to know that, listen, we appreciate how you have been here today for Ruffin It. We appreciate how you have come here to hear how your relationships can be empowered, how your relationships can be improved, how they can be enlightened. But I hope that, listen, at the end of the day, that this has helped to make a difference in your relationships. And so, listen, once again, this is therapist and pastor Marcus Ruffin. I want to thank you so much for being here today. Listen, most people feel misunderstood and unheard, and therefore this is why listening is so vital. So whether it's personal or professional, I'm telling you, communication is what bridges the gap. And so listen, I thank you for being here, but I also thank you for not just being here, but I thank you for the opportunity, listen, to be able to support this ministerial broadcast. And because, listen, we thank you for your support. I'm giving you the information by which, listen, you may know how you can make that happen. So you can help support this ministerial broadcast, listen, by going to Cash App at LifeEmpowermentCh. If you believe that this has been a blessing to you, if this has made a difference with you, then listen, I'm saying to you, listen, let it be something that you financially support. Listen, if you give through the PayPal, listen, as you can see here on the screen, here's our PayPal information, LEC at let-god.org. That's our PayPal account. So once again, I thank you for all of your support that you give here through this ministerial broadcast. Listen, I also want to let you know that if you want to write a check, for some of us, we like writing checks. We like doing money orders. Here's a way for you to be able to support this broadcast. Life Empowerment Church, P.O. Box 7958, Moreno Valley, California, 92552. And so, listen, however you support us. We thank you for supporting us. And one of the things that we've been doing here is raising money for our media ministry. And so we're asking everybody to be able to give $100 to be able to help us raise the money that we need. We need about 30 more people to give $100 to be able to meet the budget that we have for this media upgrade that we need to do here at Life Empowerment Church. And so listen, it's going to make Ruffin it even a better experience. And so I thank you for the opportunity for you to be able to help and to meet that budget. And so listen, I thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being here with us today. And listen, we look forward to seeing you again next Thursday as we're going to be talking even more about this communication piece to relationships. And so listen, I thank you. I appreciate you. And listen, if this has been a blessing to you, make sure you share this with somebody else. Make sure that you take the time to share this. Say, hey, I think this will be helpful. If you're struggling in some area with somebody, this is a good way to be able to help bridge the gap and to make up the difference. And so listen, this is Pastor and Therapist Marcus Ruffin. This has been Ruffin It Again. I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. You be blessed.